Saren Vale hadn't meant to stop outside the war chamber. She had been passing through, quiet, efficient, unnoticed, like always. The doors were slightly open, just enough. Voices slipped through, low, controlled, familiar. She would have kept walking, until she heard him. She was never meant to survive. Saren didn't move, didn't breathe, because she knew that voice, Alpha King Kaelor Vir. Inside, silence followed the statement. Not tense, not shocked, just accepted, like nothing about it needed to be questioned. Saren's fingers tightened slightly at her sides, her body going still in a way that had nothing to do with fear. It was recognition, because there was no confusion. No one else it could be. She served her purpose, Kaelor added. Calm, measured, final. Something in Serene's chest shifted. Not sharp enough to hurt, not sudden enough to break. Just settling, like a truth finding its place. A second voice spoke, one of the commanders, careful, controlled. And if she finds out? A pause, short, unimportant. She won't, Kaelor replied, and then, the part that stayed, she trusts me. Serene closed her eyes briefly, not in denial, not in disbelief, just stillness. Because that was the only part that required confirmation. Trust. That had been real. Or at least, she had believed it was. The quiet moments. The way he had found her when no one else had. The way he had given her space within his territory, without explanation, without definition. The way his attention had lingered just enough to feel intentional. None of it had been questioned, because she hadn't needed to question it. Until now. Seren opened her eyes again, her gaze fixed on the narrow line of light slipping through the door. Everything inside continued as normal. No urgency, no hesitation, just strategy moving forward. And she was no longer part of it. That realization didn't come with panic. It came with clarity, clean, cold, useful. Because if she had been meant to die, then staying would only complete the plan. Seren stepped back silently. No sound, no disruption, no sign she had ever been there. And for the first time since Kaelor Vir had found her, she understood exactly what she needed to do. Leave. Before he realized she already knew, Seren didn't stop walking. Not through the corridor. Not past the guards. Not even when the palace swallowed the sound of the war chamber behind her. Because stopping meant thinking. And thinking would slow her down. She reached her quarters without drawing attention, closing the door with the same quiet precision she used for everything else. Nothing had changed. Same space, same stillness. Only now. It felt staged. Serene stood in the center of the room for a moment, her gaze drifting across details she had once accepted without question. The bed placed close to the inner wall, easy to monitor. The single window, narrow, controlled, positioned where movement could be seen from outside. The lack of excess, no personalization, no permanence. At the time, it had felt like restraint. Now, it looked like design. She exhaled slowly, because this wasn't new. None of it was. Only her understanding had changed. Kaelor hadn't found her by accident, not when she had been alone beyond the borders, barely surviving, invisible to every pack that passed her by. He had seen her, chosen her, brought her in, not with warmth, not with promises, but with something more dangerous, attention, and she had accepted it, without asking why. Her fingers brushed lightly against the edge of the table, grounding, steady, because she remembered now. The way he observed more than he spoke, The way he never explained her place within his territory. The way his presence always felt measured, never careless. Nothing spontaneous, nothing unplanned. Even his silence had purpose. Seren let out a quiet breath, because what she had mistaken for distance had been control. What she had believed was restraint had been calculation, and what she had thought might become something more had never been intended to. The realization didn't hurt, not in the way it should have. It clarified, stripped everything down to what it actually was, a position, a role, a purpose she had never been told, until now. Seren moved without hesitation, pulling open the small storage beneath the table. There wasn't much to gather. She hadn't built a life here. That had never been the point. And suddenly, she was grateful for that. Because leaving would be easier when nothing tied her to the space. No attachment, no delay, just movement, just survival. Seren straightened, her expression unchanged, because whatever she had been before this moment didn't matter anymore. Now, she knew exactly what she was, temporary, and temporary things were meant to disappear. Seren didn't rush. That would have been a mistake. Panic leaves traces. Fear creates patterns, and she couldn't afford either. By the time the palace shifted into its late-night rhythm, she was already moving, not toward the main corridors, not toward the gates, but through the quieter paths, the ones she had learned without realizing she was learning them. The routes servants used when they didn't want to be seen. The blind spots between patrol rotations. The places where attention thinned just enough to pass unnoticed. Kaelor had taught her that. Not directly, but in the way he operated, in the way he controlled space, in the way he saw everything that mattered and ignored everything that didn't. Seren adjusted her path instinctively, her steps measured, her breathing steady. She didn't hesitate at corners, didn't second-guess direction, because hesitation made noise. And she had spent too long learning how to be quiet. The outer halls came into view faster than expected. No resistance, no interruption. That was the final confirmation. No one was watching her. No one had ever been assigned to. She passed the last guarded threshold just before patrol shifted, her timing aligning perfectly with the gap between attention. The guard barely glanced at her, didn't question, didn't stop her, because she wasn't someone who required scrutiny. Seren stepped beyond the boundary without breaking stride. Cold air met her immediately, sharper, less controlled than the palace behind her. She didn't look back, not at the walls, not at the territory, because there was nothing there for her anymore. Only a plan she had unknowingly been part of. The ground changed beneath her feet as she moved further out, the structured paths giving way to uneven terrain, forest, unclaimed land, and beyond that, something worse, enemy territory. Seren didn't slow, didn't reconsider, because staying within Kaelor's reach was no longer survival, it was compliance. And she was done being part of something she didn't choose. The border wasn't marked clearly. No walls, no lines, just a shift in presence, in scent, in atmosphere. Seren felt it the moment she crossed. Subtle, but undeniable. Different, dangerous, final. She exhaled slowly, her steps continuing forward without pause, because whatever waited ahead, at least it wouldn't be controlled by him. And for the first time since she had been brought into his world, Seren was no longer part of his design. The forest didn't welcome her. It didn't warn her either. It simply existed, dense, unfamiliar, and indifferent to whether she survived it. Serene kept moving, not fast, not slow, just consistent. Speed made noise. Hesitation made mistakes, and she didn't know this territory well enough to afford either. The air felt different here, heavier, less structured. Kaelor's lands had always been controlled, patrolled, observed, contained. This place wasn't. It breathed differently. Wild, unpredictable. Every step forward felt like stepping deeper into something that didn't answer to rules she understood. That should have unsettled her. It didn't. Because unpredictability was still safer than intention. Serene adjusted her path slightly, avoiding open ground, keeping close to natural cover. Not instinct. Learned behavior. Watch. Adapt. Move. The same principles that had kept her alive before Kaelor, before she had been seen. Her body felt steadier here, not stronger, but clearer, because there was no expectation, no role to maintain, no presence to measure herself against. Just survival. Hours passed without shape. The light shifted. The air cooled. Serene didn't stop, didn't rest. Not yet. Because distance mattered, and she needed enough of it that turning back wouldn't even be an option. That was the only way to make this real. A branch snapped somewhere behind her. Serene froze instantly. Not out of fear, out of precision. Her breath slowed. Her posture stilled. Listening. Nothing moved immediately. No follow-up sound. No shift in the air. But the silence, it wasn't empty. It held. Serene didn't turn. Not yet. Because reacting too soon could confirm she had been noticed. Instead, she shifted her weight subtly, grounding herself, preparing. Another sound. Closer this time. Deliberate. Not accidental. Someone was there. Watching. Serene's gaze lifted slightly, scanning without fully turning her body. The forest hadn't changed, but something within it had. Attention, focused, directed, on her. She exhaled once, slow and controlled, because this was the moment she had been moving toward. Not escape, not freedom, but consequence. And running from Kaelor had never meant she would be safe. It just meant she had chosen a different danger. Serene turned then. Not abruptly, not defensively, just enough to face what had already found her. And for the first time since crossing the border, she stopped moving. He didn't step out immediately. That was the first thing Serene noticed. No sudden movement. No attempt to startle her. Just presence. Deliberate. Measured. Watching. Serene didn't retreat. Didn't reach for anything. Because there was nothing to reach for. And running now would only confirm weakness. The silence stretched just long enough to feel intentional. Then he moved. Not from directly behind her. From the side. Into view. Serene's gaze locked onto him instantly. Tall. Still. Controlled. Not a scout. Not a guard. Something else. Something that didn't need to prove itself. His eyes didn't scan her. Didn't assess her like a threat. They settled. Like he had already decided she wasn't one. That was more dangerous. "You crossed the border without hesitation," he said. His voice wasn't raised. Didn't need to be. It carried. Serene didn't answer immediately, because answering gave away intention. And she wasn't sure what he was measuring yet. "I didn't expect a welcome," she said finally. Honest, but incomplete. His expression didn't change. "If you were expecting survival," he replied, "you chose the wrong direction." Serene held his gaze. "That depends on what was behind me." A pause. Not long, but enough, because something in her response had shifted the space between them. Not power, not control, just interest. His gaze sharpened slightly, not aggressive, focused. "You're not from here," he said, not a question. "No." "You're not lost." Also not a question. "No." Silence again. But this time, it wasn't neutral. It was assessment. Serene didn't move, didn't fill the space, because speaking too much created openings, and she had learned openings could be used. "Then you left something," he said. Serene's expression didn't change. "I did." Another pause. Longer this time, because now he was deciding, not whether she was a threat, but whether she was worth something else. Serene felt it. That shift. Subtle, but present. "You're still standing," he added. Serene didn't look away. "So are you." That almost changed something. Not visibly, but enough to register, because most people would have lowered their gaze by now, would have conceded space, position, authority. Serene didn't. Not out of defiance, out of clarity, because she didn't belong to anything anymore, and for the first time, that wasn't a weakness. The man studied her for a moment longer. Then he stepped closer. Not threatening, not slow, just certain. Then, "We'll see how long that lasts." He didn't attack her. That was the first deviation from expectation. No immediate threat. No attempt to restrain her. Just presence. Close now. Close enough that Serene could register the details she had missed at a distance. Control. Not the kind Kaylor carried. Sharp. Calculated. Outward. This was quieter. Contained. Like something that didn't need to prove it existed. Serene didn't step back. Didn't shift. Because movement would suggest uncertainty. And she had already crossed too far to pretend she was unsure. "You know whose land you're standing in," he said. Still not a question. "Yes." His gaze didn't leave her. "And you crossed anyway." "Yes." The repetition wasn't defiance. It was confirmation, because denying it would serve no purpose. Another pause. Shorter now, because whatever assessment he had been making was nearly complete. Serene felt it in the way his attention settled, not searching anymore, deciding. "You're not here by accident," he said. "No." "Then you chose this?" "Yes." Silence. But this time, it wasn't neutral. It carried weight, because choice implied intent, and intent was dangerous. "Why?" he asked, the first real question. Serene held his gaze. Because the answer mattered. Not just to him, but to what came next. "Because staying where I was meant dying," she said. No hesitation, no dramatics, just truth. Something shifted then, not visibly, but in the way the air tightened slightly between them. Because that answer, it wasn't reckless. It was calculated, and he recognized it. "You're being hunted," he said. Again, not a question. Serene didn't correct him, because it didn't matter if it was active yet. It would be. Yes. Another pause. Long enough this time to matter, because now he was deciding something else, not about her survival, but about his involvement in it. Serene didn't speak, didn't push, because pushing someone like him would end badly. Instead, she waited, still, present, unhidden, and that was the difference. She wasn't asking for protection, wasn't offering anything, just existing within his space, without permission. He studied her for one last moment, then turned, not away from her, but toward something deeper within the forest. "Follow," he said, simple, unexplained, final. Serene didn't move immediately, because following meant something, not safety, not trust, but alignment, attention. temporary one. On his terms. She understood that. But staying where she wasn't an option either. So after a brief pause, Serene stepped forward and followed. He didn't look back to see if she followed. That told Serene everything she needed to know. This wasn't an invitation. It was an assumption. And somehow, that was easier to trust than anything she had left behind. She kept her distance as they moved deeper into the forest, matching his pace without trying to close the space between them. Not too close, not too far. Close enough to remain within his awareness, far enough to stay independent. The path wasn't marked, no visible trail, but he moved like he knew exactly where he was going. No hesitation, no adjustment. Serene noted it quietly, because this wasn't just territory. It was control of territory, a different kind than Kaylor's. Less structured, more embedded. They didn't speak, not at first. The silence wasn't empty. It was observational, mutual. He was measuring. So was she. The forest shifted as they moved, denser in some places, thinning in others. The air carrying subtle signs of presence she couldn't fully identify yet. Not patrols, not guards. Something else. Organized, but not obvious. After some time, he slowed slightly. Not enough to stop, just enough to signal transition. Serene felt it before she saw it. The shift, the space opening just enough to suggest something built within it. Not a camp, not temporary, intentional. He stepped into it without pause. Serene followed a second later. Structures emerged from the forest, integrated rather than imposed, blending into the terrain in a way that made them difficult to notice from a distance. People were there. They noticed her immediately, not with alarm, not with aggression, but with attention, focused, curious, measured. No one moved toward her. No one spoke, because the man in front of her hadn't acknowledged her yet. And until he did, she didn't exist here either. Serene stopped just inside the boundary, her posture unchanged, her expression steady, waiting. Not passively, deliberately. He finally turned then, his gaze settling on her again. Not surprised she had followed. Not impressed. Just confirming. "You crossed into the wrong territory," he said. Serene met his gaze. "I crossed into the only one that wasn't his." A pause. Something in his expression shifted, slightly. Not agreement, not contradiction. Recognition. "Then you understand where you are," he said. Serene didn't hesitate. "Yes." Another pause. Then, "You don't belong here." Serene's voice didn't change. "I didn't belong there either." Silence. Longer this time, because that answer didn't resolve anything. It complicated it. And for the first time, that seemed to matter. Serene wasn't given a room. Not a welcome. Not a role. Not even a reason to exist here. She was simply allowed to remain. And that was more dangerous than rejection. Because rejection has edges. Permission has silence. She stayed where she was placed, just inside the settlement boundary, feeling the weight of unseen eyes, without ever meeting them. No one approached her. No one spoke to her. But no one ignored her either. Every movement she made was measured in silence. Every stillness was noted, not as threat, but as data. Serene didn't try to fill the space. She didn't ask questions. She didn't leave, because survival wasn't about belonging anymore. It was about control of self. Hours passed. Light shifted. The settlement continued around her, as if she were a fixed point in something still being calculated. Then, he returned. She felt him before she saw him. That controlled presence cutting through everything without effort. People shifted slightly as he passed. Not afraid, not impressed. Recognizing certainty. He stopped in front of her. "You stayed," he said. "You told me to follow," Seren replied evenly. "And now you're not leaving." No. A pause. Something shifted. Not in him, but in the space between them. "Good," he said. That single word changed nothing and everything at once. He turned slightly. Get her food. No debate. No explanation. It wasn't kindness. It was confirmation. She wasn't being removed. She was being assessed. And for the first time, Seren wasn't reacting. She was choosing how to exist inside it. Kaelor knew before the report arrived. Something in his territory had gone quiet in the wrong way. "She's gone," the commander confirmed. No panic, just fact. Last seen near the war chamber. Silence. Then, the border. That changed nothing logically, but it changed everything structurally. "She wouldn't survive beyond it," someone said. Kaelor's expression didn't move. "Yes," he replied, but the conclusion didn't settle, because Seren wasn't careless, and she didn't run blindly, which meant she had chosen it. Kaelor turned. "Prepare my departure." A pause. "You're going yourself?" "Yes." No justification, because this wasn't retrieval, and it wasn't punishment. It was recognition. A variable had moved outside his design, and for the first time, Kaelor didn't know if he was correcting an error or following something that had already begun to matter.